Good evening and welcome to IEThinc. A warm welcome to all of people who've logged in from different parts of the country, to all our panelists, to everyone who's watching us today. This is an express event. IEThinc is an express event where we get some of the best minds to discuss some of the most pressing concerns of the day. So the theme for today is COVID, education, and the big change. With schools and colleges shutting down in response to COVID, this has been challenging times, and this is a situation without parallel. We are all struggling. I can definitely speak for myself here, and we are all finding our way. So while we all agree that COVID has been extremely challenging, the attempt is to see what has changed. And especially now, as schools and universities gradually open up, how different will these institutions be? Is this the disruption education needed? Will it transform education in India for the better? These are some of the questions that our expert panel will unpack over the next hour or so. So before I move on, I take this opportunity to thank our partners. Our presenting partner is Hiranandani Group, Associate Partner, NITI Mumbai, MIT ADT University, SPJIMR. Our live webcast partner is 24 Frames Digital. So before we go ahead, let me introduce this very illustrious panel. We have with us, starting off with Dr. Amita Mullavattal. She's principal of Springdale's Pusa Road, one of the pioneers of inclusive. The school is one of the pioneers of inclusive education. I'm sure you've all heard of the school. She's a former chairperson of the National Progressive Schools Conference, is a CBSE governing board member, and is chairperson of the local global inclusive education network. She's one of the most articulate voices you'll find in the area of education, and so people haven't heard her so far, you'll hear her today. Next, Dr. Sundar Ramaswamy, Vice Chancellor, Kriya University. Dr. Ramaswamy is a professional economist, educator, and currently Vice Chancellor of Kriya University, one of the youngest universities on the map now. Dr. Ramaswamy is also a distinguished college professor of international economics at Middlebury College, one of the top-ranked liberal arts institutions in the US. Welcome, Dr. Ramaswamy. We have Dr. Ram Gopal Rao, Director, IIT Delhi, one of the top institutions, a dream destination for lakhs who attend the JEE exams every year. Dr. Rao has over 450 research publications in the area of nanoscale devices and nanoelectronics, and is an inventor on 45 patents and patent applications. Welcome, Dr. Rao. Mr. Saurabh Swamy, Rajasthan Cadre IAS officer of the 2015 batch, is Director Education in the Rajasthan government. Mr. Swamy is an electronics and communications engineer by training. Rajasthan has, of course, has some very interesting experiments in the field of education. They've made some rapid strides in learning outcomes and have topped the Niti Aayog's second to Kerala, of course, 2019 School Education Quality Index. It's called SEQI. So if I were to ask to begin with, so a very warm welcome to all of you. So if I were to ask each of you to talk of one way that you see education emerging out of this pandemic, one big change. I know there have been several, but one that you have witnessed. And let's look at, and since there are four experts here, so let's look at this from the point of view of the different stakeholders here, students of universities, the brand itself, the university brand, teachers, of the government. So if we could start, Dr. Rao, if you can talk about what is a big change? What is that one big change you've witnessed in the last 1 year when it comes to students?
Yeah, I think we have entered almost like a year now. So last March when all this started. So within a year at IIT Delhi, if I look back, almost like 1,400 courses that we teach have gone online. So now they are all available as digital content, and that's one big change. And during this period, we also have started certificate programs. IIT system typically is you have very huge entry barriers. You conduct these world's most difficult kind of examinations, take a few people, and then you give them high quality education, and they all graduate. No exit barrier, hardly any exit barrier. But what we did at IIT Delhi, which is also happening in many of our higher educational institutions of repute, is this model turning down. I mean, this model is turned down on its head. And one way is now we have lowered the entry barrier for our online programs. So we admit a large number of students, and then we provide them the same quality education, which is online, of course, but there are many courses which can be taught effectively even in the online mode. And then we conduct a very difficult examination at the exit end, and that is where those who qualify that examination will get a certificate from IIT Delhi, and they will also become our alumni. I think that is one thing that we have started now during this period. In a normal time, IITs being what they are, with all the brand consciousness that we have, I don't think it would have happened all that easily. But now IIT Delhi is offering multiple certificate programs. We will start giving diplomas slowly once people start, accumulating some of these credits. That's one major change that has happened, and which would have taken another 7 to 10 years, in a normal period of time. The second most important thing that has also happened is even for us a sort of a self-discovery on the potential of our institutions. During the COVID period, the research that has happened on our campuses, just to take the IIT Delhi situation, we have had 5 million high quality masks which have come out of IIT Delhi startups, which are all based on the technologies that are produced in our laboratories, and 60% of them are now getting exported. And we have the world's most affordable RT-PCR kit. RT-PCR kit before IIT Delhi kit came into the market was being charged as at 4,500 rupees or so. We launched it at that time at 399 rupees. Now everybody is doing RT-PCR at 600 to 800 rupees. That kit was entirely developed at IIT Delhi. And we also have on the treatment side, a lot of innovations in terms of looking at Indian traditional medicines for fighting COVID. All this, is in a way kind of a self-discovery. That is what I call innovation. So during a period of 1 year, so much has happened, which in a normal, mode would have taken much longer. I think to me, it is nothing less than transformative. And so now it will never be the same again. And I think education has gone through a major sea change. And the way we look at research, the way we look at science has also undergone a major change now. That is one silver lining out of all the troubles that we have gone through because of COVID.
Yeah, thank you. So, Dr. Ramaswamy, would you want to take over from there and talk about the university itself and the brand of the brand itself? What has changed, do you think?
Thank you, Oman. Thank you for the organizers for this panel. It's a continuous to remain an important topic. As Dr. Rao said, it's amazing to think that a year has gone by and we still have not thought of a semblance of how to go back to what life was in, say, February of 2020, right? When you think about the university, and we're a very young university compared to, say, IIT or Delhi University or many of the others, but there's one word that I sort of keep at the back of my head in terms of thinking about my faculty and my students and how they have reacted over this last 1 year. And the word is RITE, R-I-T-E. And I'll just expand each of the letters. I think for me, the R stands for resilience. Initially, I think when we went online, I think nobody had a clue of how long we were going to stay online. And I think we sort of went into a digital frame of thinking and teaching, which was taking what we used to do in the classroom and sort of trying to put it on a platform on Canvas or Zoom or something. The I then follows, which is innovation, right? So when summer happened and then we realized we're continuing to remain online, faculty started to get more innovative in terms of how do you teach, and how do you teach, say, history differently than, say, physics or chemistry, and how do you do experiments online? Sometimes you can get the kids to do it with their what's available at home, but otherwise you can also use digital lab experiments or actually be innovative in how you think about education itself. The T is a word that I'll sort of think from what Dr. Rao said, transformational. I think so many aspects of the universities, whether it's pedagogy, whether it's the way we fundraise, whether the way we have meetings with donors, I think all of that has become, by definition, a necessity to transform the way we have conducted business. And it'll be interesting to know whether when we do go back after vaccinations are universal and so on, will we sort of go back? I doubt. I think there'll be lots of things that we have been using right now that would have transformed the way we conduct our business of the university, but also the way we teach, the way we do research, that I think will become part of the new way of doing things. And the last letter, E, is something that I think we tend to forget, but I'd like to emphasize, which is empathy, right? One of the things, especially in a country like India, with the digital divide and the fact that even though connectivity has improved dramatically in the last few years, there is still infrastructure problems like power outages and so on. So when we have dispersed students back to various places, and then there is no boundary between school life and home life, and they have to also do all the household chores and study. I mean, I think it has also really made us dig deep within ourselves as humans to be empathetic as teachers, to be empathetic as peers with our colleagues, to be empathetic with our parents of students, because I think we managed it in a way that we have had to address how do we develop the individual as a whole child, which is Kriya's philosophy, but how do you do this when they are in their own hometowns, some of which are in metro cities, some of which are in very rural areas. And so this idea of empathy, which I think we talk about it, but I think it has forced all of us, because this pandemic has not just visited one country or one region, it's a global pandemic. So we are all in it together, which means we all also have to figure out how do we get out of this together. So it's really the way I would think about it is the resilience, innovation, transformation, and empathy.
That's interesting. You call it right.
Right.
Yeah. So, Dr. Wattal, coming to you next. Teachers, of course, they've had it very difficult. They've had to pick up new skills overnight. So, would you want to talk about that? I mean, where are they? Where were they, and where are they now? We can't hear you.
I beg your pardon. Thank you very much, Uma, for having me and on such a wonderful panel with Dr. Rao, Dr. Ramaswamy, and other distinguished members. I wish I could romanticize COVID. I can't, and I won't. It's been, as it is, school education was not a very happy situation. And, it was not designed to ever fulfill the needs of our children. And on top of it, with COVID coming in, it showed a complete spotlight on our inequalities. And all this while, we were treating, the whole issue of digital connections as a private luxury. But it was not a luxury suddenly when the COVID came, because there were these schools in pockets which had access to a couple of smart boards, some had access to a couple of laptops, but essentially the whole of India did not have that kind of wherewithal where we could make connections. And unlike my other panelists who are dealing with adults, we're dealing with young people whose values, whose abilities, whose skills, whose choices, whose transgressions, whose progressions have not been developed. And so it's very difficult, and it was a great challenge for teachers to teach in this eventuality. Because not only were we looking at transforming a school where children would come in online at 8 o'clock in the morning and be there till about 12 or so. Having said that, at the same time, the whole structure of school did not exist. There were no uniforms, there were no bells, there was no way of ensuring that children were there. The teachers themselves had never suddenly got on and done a complete system online. So I think the first 15 days to 1 month, there was a lot of grappling with how do you cope. But I would say that they're remarkable, the way that the teachers got on with it and the kind of accreditations that were done, the kind of workshops that were conducted, the way that children sort of supported. And I would say that the parent community was absolutely amazing. Because now the teacher was not only teaching to one child, she was teaching to the entire community. Because we had grandparents who were lawyers, and we had doctors who were viewing us all the time. We had an entire generation of people, an entire profession of people who were viewing every lesson. And so you had to grab, when you were an economics teacher teaching grade 12, you had a leading economist who was watching your class. Or if you had a history teacher teaching grade 9, you had a historian who didn't know where to go because there's a lockdown and he was viewing your class. So it was a pretty tough call. for all the teachers. But I think what really happened was that a fantastic communication and bond developed, because that's when parents really realized the value of the teaching community. Because without that, we would have been in the dark. Where would the children have been for 1 year if there had been a lockdown blackout of learning? And I think the amount that teachers gave, because I think the principal really became a pollinator of ideas, but the face of the school was the teacher. The teacher is the one who became the hero. The teacher is the one who entered the homes. And I think that gave a lot of self-esteem. It gave a different perspective. But I'm again talking about a very small group of people, because there was an entire group of people in India who didn't have that kind of privilege, who didn't have that. And so there's been a huge learning gap. It's somehow or the other, we have to grapple with and contend with, and we have to fill it. And the biggest concern is there's never going to be a post-COVID. There's going to be a post-COVID, there's going to be a new COVID. I mean, I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but the way that our lives are moving, it's a very different world out here. In fact, I would say that, you know, for when we say that things have changed, they've changed at a very deeper level. They've changed in lives, in habits, in norms, in thinking. And so this is the kind of stuff we have to constantly grapple with, because the way that we're going to look at schools, the way we're going to look at the way children connect with each other, that has changed hugely. And I know that today there are people who are online with children who say, and I know this personally, that when I call children into schools, when they came in, when schools officially were supposed to open, and with a lot of fear and trepidation, parents sent in children, children were not able to write. They were not able to pick up that pen and write a paragraph of 350 words. They were finding it difficult to write, because and this was terrible, because these are cognitive skills. These are motor skills that we're dealing with. And so, and they were emotionally not able to connect. There are children in nursery and prep and class 1 who hide their faces, who don't know how to make connections with children of the same age group, because they've grown up when they were maybe 2 years old when COVID struck, and they're now 3+, when technically they should have been in a creche, or they could have been in another school where they would have been talking to kids of their own age. So communication, collaboration, connection, understanding learning, understanding basic skills, looking at how do we speak, group discussions, conversations, they've taken a big hit. And these are very important aspects of what learning has to be, of learning, and what has to be brought into school. So I think we have to really relook and reimagine the way that we're going to look at how schools should run. So the whole idea of these big melas, these big carnivals in schools, these huge auditoriums with these big annual days, the big fat Indian wedding, that's all gone. Small is beautiful. And I think we have to start now looking at personalized learning, at breakout rooms, at cluster learning. And that's what we were trying to do during the COVID. So children would not get lost in cyberspace. So with that, I sort of rest my first question.
You're right about this segment being the hardest hit, the young kids, the 2-year-olds and the 3-year-olds who. So Dr. Vatal also spoke about this big segment that got left out, you know, the digital divides that we keep hearing about. So Mr. Swami, this is I'm sure one challenge that the government faced when COVID hit. Would you like to talk about that? How did the government deal with? How did the Rajasthan government, in your case, deal with this?
Thanks, Uma, and good evening to everyone. So basically, during the COVID times, I just would like to give some facts. We had around 65,000 schools with more than 85 lakh students, and somewhat similar amount was present with private setup as well. So suddenly there was a lag in education since all the schools were closed, and we were like thinking now what to do. So in that case came one more thing, as Amita ma'am just said, that there was a digital divide. So basically we had around 40 to 45 lakh students that were connected through our WhatsApp groups, but what to do about the rest? So so we had two challenges. First challenge was to create a digital content, so that would be like understandable to even for the city as well as for the village household children. So that was the major thing, and that should the language that should be more of a vernacular language. In that case, we made our own videos. So we named our program eKaksha, and all those videos are available live on YouTube, and app is there. So because of that, all those videos were circulated on WhatsApp. So around my 45 lakh students were seeing all those videos. Now, what about the rest? So that the rest came after 2.5 months, when we realized that there is a gap in our learning. So we started a campaign "Aao Ghar Se Seekhe Abhiyan." So as the name suggests, and I would like to also congratulate all the teachers that, as Amita ma'am said, that they took upon the responsibility. They went to household, they went to mohalla setup. So they went over there, they collected the students in an open area kind of thing, you can say, under a banyan tree, or in a a gaon, in a village there is a big home where all the students will assimilate. So, and what we started the concept of portfolio. So every week we used to give them homework, and next week the teacher will go, they will check the homework, collect it, and give them new homework. And plus all the doubts that were there, that were also means tackled at that time itself. So it helped in many ways. Firstly, it helped in bridging the digital divide. Like we can, along with the eKaksha video that were present, we were able to tackle all the doubts. Plus, the students, they were like not left out. And similarly, as ma'am said, that we were being judged. So as soon as the teacher would go to a family, so the mother over there or the father over there or whosoever will be there, he will be also interested that what the teacher is teaching to my children. So that was the first thing that connected, a government school teacher is connecting with the parents and showing that yes, we are concerned about your children. So that was the major fact. How it affected later on when the schools opened. So they opened around in February over here in Rajasthan for 6 to 12. So, there was a huge shift in attendance. If I compare that with private part, there were around 40 to 50%, but in government aspect, there were more than 90%. So this boosted us, like we were fearing that dropouts will be more. So we had to start a new campaign for dropout, especially for girls. But since we got such high attendance at that point of time, so we were so much thrilled. And plus, so that part helped because our teachers were very much religious in the work that they were doing. They were going, they were preparing the portfolios, they were doing that extra bit. Now, then, as soon as our school started, so we now shifted from Guru Shiksha ke andar wo offline like teaching mode. So we shifted from that to blended learning. So we had some smart classrooms. We also are preparing to get new ones in all of our secondary and senior secondary setups. So there are around 15,000 schools in that setup. We had smart classrooms in around 8,000 of them. So we had started showing them eKaksha content because, as you know, COVID will not go. It is there to stay with us. And in any condition, in future, if we face such circumstances, then our students should be familiar with how to educate themselves, how to self-educate, as well as with the help of digital videos, and how to establish a connection in live class as well, in a two-way medium. So that is a big challenge, especially for government school children as well, because that was the first time that they were interacting in that platform, and especially for the kids in class 1st to 5th. So we have been quite successful in this, I guess, and we are moving forward as well as for our back to school campaign, in which we will be looking forward in all these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. That's a lot of work. So, Dr. Rao mentioned online diplomas and innovation that's now possible. So, if I can, if let's not say me. So, if a student in India can take an MIT course online, will these changes in some way change the idea of the university itself? Dr. Ramaswamy, if you would like to take that up, the university as a building, as a structure, is that under threat?
It could be, and let me frame this your question with a little bit of a context. And I've been wondering about this for quite some time. And pre-pandemic, I was doing some research on global spread of global liberal arts, and I came across an interesting factoid that as human beings who like to organize institutions, but there are only about 85 institutions that have lasted 500 years or more. So when I came across that, I was struck by it, and I started sort of investigating and going down that rabbit hole. Because we look at the last 500 years, it's a pretty amazing period of human history with such tectonic shifts. The printing press comes to mind. And then, of course, the industrial revolutions 1, 2, and 3, and we are in the midst of industrial revolution number 4. The great wars of last century, the Great Depression, the 1918 pandemic. So we have seen an incredible amount of change as humanity. And of course, not to mention rising population and climate change and all that in the recent past, right? So in the last 500 years, if as humans who come together to form institutions and only 85 of them have survived, I'm an economist, and companies don't even make that list because joint stock companies don't come till maybe the middle of the 17th and 18th centuries. So obviously religious institutions come to mind, like Catholic Church or Sringeri Madam and things like that. But what is absolutely stunning for me as an educator was to learn that 71 of these were universities, right? And we only know about the Oxfords and the Cambridges, even Harvard doesn't make that list. But my point is, universities as a center of knowledge, production, dissemination, research, teaching, has somehow found a way to last through some cataclysmic changes. So I wouldn't write off the university just yet. Of course, many universities will go bankrupt, new universities, but the idea of a university, it'll be interesting whether it can withstand COVID the way it did the Spanish flu or any of these other changes I'm talking about, right? But I do think, Uma, to your question, universities are never static. They will find a way to incorporate, after all, Coursera and edX have been around for a long time. And what is interesting is our own faculty now have become purveyors of online, right? Because as I've said in my earlier piece, we have all had to do it. So I do think some version of blended learning, what does it mean to create a diploma? What makes a diploma from an IIT Delhi or a Kriya valid? It's the 36 courses. But what if I took those 36 courses from all top universities, but who's going to credentialize it? Who's going to pull it together and give it the stamp of this is an IIT diploma, right? So there's also the buying side of that diploma. The companies have to say, if you take 30 courses from different parts, is that enough? And then it also breaks up. And one of the things I liked about what Amita said, and all of us who are educators, there is so much more to teaching than just giving information. Because if it were just giving information, when Google and Android came about, we should have all gone out of business because everybody has access to information. Yeah. So there is so much more about teaching that we have learned in the last year. And I think we all should have learned, but we all knew that as teachers. But I think rest of society is paying attention to what does it mean to actually teach. And that is different than just conveying information. So I do think that the university as a physical structure, the buildings and the spires and all of this, that we all wax eloquently as alumni, we like our physical spaces, but I also think there will be an e-university for everything, and there will be a classic, what an economist by the name of Joseph Schumpeter calls creative destruction. Many things will fold, some will come around, and we will see some change. But I wouldn't write off the concept of a university just yet. If you go back to what I started my comment with, which is, I don't know whether COVID is any more destructive than any of those changes that I mentioned over the last 500 years, and yet somehow the knowledge production, dissemination, and so on. And it'll be fascinating to see how we all, going back to my earlier point about being nimble and innovative, I think the ones that will manage will come out of this. So there again, I do worry about, we shouldn't cleave this into haves and have-nots. The universities that have money, resources, access may come out of the divide much better than others. And it's worse when you get down into the K-12 space between schools that are very well endowed and schools that are dependent on public funds. So I do think, as an economist, inequality is on the rise globally, and I worry about what inequality will do within a country like India, but also across countries. So universities have to both study it, but also be the conveyors of change in a good way, so that we don't widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Because the last thing we want in a country like India is sort of an islands of excellence and opulence and opportunity surrounded by a sea of deprivation and lack of opportunity, because that is just a disaster for a democracy like ours.
Yeah. So yeah, just to press that point further, do you think the power of universities to decide who's going to walk in through my doors and the power to exclude, really, will that diminish in a sense? You think?
I hope it also makes. I hope universities do pay attention to who all they're reaching out, because the one thing about scale is, instead of teaching 100 students, can I teach 1,000 students? But of course, what does it mean to teach online? And I think we need to address that very carefully. But I think it may make universities, and should make universities, a lot more humbler about who we admit and who we don't. I do think we have a social good. All universities should think about that purpose, so that equal opportunity. I'm not saying we throw the doors open and everyone walks in, but you can have your own standards of who gets in. But in terms of access, I do think the digital has opened up a door for really excellent teaching to be reaching out to a much larger population, and maybe not just limited, Uma, to the 18 to 22-year-olds or graduate students. I'm also thinking, given that most of us are going to hopefully live up to 70s, maybe lifelong learning, different kinds of modularized learning. I think it's high time universities become platforms for really imagining what learning is. And not just the traditional, you finish 12 years and then you finish 4 years at college, or 3 years, and then you do graduate school and get a PhD. And no, I think we should also think very creatively, and many universities across the world do this, and even in our own country. But I think many universities can start reaching out to what happens to the mid-career people. How do I reach out to them? Or how do I reach out to adult learners? So I think for everything that we pose as a challenge, I'm a huge believer that the opposite side is really a great opportunity, and creative and nimble universities should try and lead the way for how we come out of this pandemic.
Yeah. So, Dr. So do you see online diplomas being more accepted in future? Do you see that happening? An online certificate is what I mean. Sir, I can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Yeah. The acceptance will come from the standardization. I think, when students learn from very diverse set of sources, you have to have an exit barrier for them. And that is what IITs are now looking at. Until now, like I was mentioning, you have an entry barrier, but no exit barrier in IITs. Now, if you turn it around, so you do not have a huge entry barrier. You take people who qualify, whatever criteria you set, and then you create an exit barrier, so that once you cross that, then you will be able to, get the diploma certificate. I think that standardization is going to be very, very important for all universities in the country. Otherwise, even UGC now is allowing a lot of online kind of courses. Now everybody will take course from so many diverse ways, and there has to be one national level kind of a testing exam or accreditation exam. Unless you clear that, you can't get the degree or diploma. I think that is the way it will happen, and I'm sure even UGC is thinking on the same lines right now.
So, if I'm right, so you're saying lowering the entry barriers, but strengthening the exit barriers, right?
Exactly. So that is what will happen. So.
Yeah. Dr. Rao, again, do you see COVID and the health crisis prompting a push for science, an even bigger push for science subjects as opposed to humanities? Do you think that will happen? In terms of funds, endowment funds, and so on. Government funding.
There was always a push for engineering. I don't know whether you call engineering as science, but we think they are all the same. I think the engineering is basically an extension of science. And I think that push has always been there. And one thing which is also definitely happening now is we have looked at research in this country as publishing papers. I think we have never looked at research beyond a paper publication kind of a thing. That is going to go through a major change now. Now, I think research is no longer just publishing a paper. Now that R&D, the research and development, will be now more and more in terms of relevance and delivery. Now, what is the relevance of your research to solving some of these problems? And if you have solved the problem, how effective are you in delivering your solution to the people who actually require that sort of a solution? So I think this R&D now will be more on the lines of relevance and delivery, and your research will be measured more in terms of in what way has it impacted the society. I think these definitions are going to happen now more and more, and the judging the research will be more on these lines than counting the number of papers and all that, which is a good sign. And I know for us to become relevant, for us to solve problems, the natural thing to do is the multidisciplinary kind of a research, because the problems don't have a discipline. The nature doesn't have a discipline. And if I want to solve, for example, the air quality problem in Delhi, there is no department to solve the air quality problem in Delhi. It requires at least 6 or 7 departments to come together, understand so many aspects of air quality, develop engineering solutions, develop sensors, develop systems. That requires 7 or 8 departments to come together and solve that problem. If you put the problem first, then all these disciplines will vanish. And that is what we have seen even during the COVID time. And during the COVID time, to develop a vaccine, a biology kind of a department could have done that. But if you wanted to develop anything beyond vaccines, for example, the treatment involved lot many people, and the prevention part of it will needed a lot of technologies to come together. The ventilators is also one example where multiple departments needed to interact with each other. So I think that multidisciplinary research has become a norm now in our institutions, and it has also shown us that if you come together and if you have a pressing problem to solve which has an urgency, I think we are able to deliver. I think that confidence also has come now in the institutions. I think these are good signs. Now, as we move forward, I don't think research is going to be judged the way it was, during the pre-COVID time, and which is a good thing for the country.
So you also see a role for students of humanities and other disciplines here.
In fact, at IIT Delhi, we have started a program because, for us in an engineering kind of an institution today, the humanities departments, I look at them as our windows to the society. I mean, otherwise, people going to the labs and working with machines, they often forget that they are actually humans. They don't know what is happening outside. They don't even empathize with the problems in the society. That is where humanities departments have a major role to play. The agriculture problem. Unless a humanity person comes and tells us these are the problems in the country, this is why the farmers are struggling, these are the technologies they require, these are the policies that we make, that is when engineering becomes more interesting. Therefore, at IIT Delhi, we have given a major push to the humanities department. We in fact started a grand challenge initiative where unless a humanities faculty member is present in a group of faculty, you wouldn't even get funded. You wouldn't even receive any funding from the institute, because I think while technology is there, the policy also needs to go hand in hand. And for technology and policy to come together, the basic understanding all starts from the sociologists and the economists in the humanities departments at a place like IIT Delhi bring to table. I think that is the expertise that we are looking at now. And I think engineers alone will not be effective unless they join hands with people with very diverse kind of disciplinary training. I think unless we bring all these people together, I don't think we will be so narrowly focused that nothing much will actually come out of that.
Dr. Ramaswamy, would you want to add to that?
I just want to echo what Dr. Rao said, and 2 things. I mean, if you look at the logo right next to my head, one of the reasons we created CREA was to break down departments and have what we are pushing called interwoven learning. Because when you look at it from a problem perspective, you do need the economists and the physicists and the biologists, but the problems don't respect disciplinary boundaries. They are problems. And so we do need people who are open to learning and talking to PhDs from other disciplines. And students really have that sort of mindset. It's just that the way our system has been, it sort of locks you in to say at 17, you're a history major or an economics major, and that's all you will study. And the other thing is, to your point to Uma about humanities and literature and social sciences, it's interesting, even at a young university like ours, there's a lot of interest in the biological sciences because of COVID. But even if you just think about the last 1 year, when you think about the migrants problem, or the fact that the reason humanity has encroached more and more into nature and thus unleashing pandemics like COVID, it has really brought also an interest in things like inequality, migration, environmental issues, which are not technical engineering subjects, right? So I agree with Dr. Rao that actually there's an incredible sort of opportunities for students to learn about history and sociology and economics and literature and the arts and the environment because of COVID. I don't think that superficially it limits itself to science, and I'm all for it. But I also think to understand the broader implications, one really needs, and in fact, I would echo going back to school level to continue that, so that that interest doesn't get ironed out because you become a commerce student or you become a science student, where we start sort of siloing them very early on, and which just builds up in higher education. Because I think what this one last year has shown us is just, the fact that we're all shocked that India in the last 20 years has such a huge migration problem. But if you talk to the people who study migration, they all said we shouldn't have been surprised that people have traveled all over the country, and suddenly if you lock them up, they all want to go back home, and we were just caught unawares. And I think those kinds of issues will continue to crop up, and dealing with nature will continue to crop up, that I think it requires a person to be trained in a discipline, but be open to talking to people of other disciplines, but have fluency with, say, environmental issues or humanities issues or historic issues. What's that saying that you learn from history that you never learn from history? If people who have studied the 1918 pandemic will tell you, in some ways, 100 years later, we are reliving that. So what is it about that we haven't learned from that period, that we're repeating the same mistakes, right? So I do think the sense of history is important. Literature, reading great works to understand how does humanity deal with dark times like we once. I think art and literature give you that. So I do think there's a ripe environment for these disciplines. And so not everything should be seen from the lens of, is it going to get me a job? Because what we have also seen is that students do get jobs if they're bright and curious and can write and think, even if they've done an English literature major or an economics major. It shouldn't just be that an engineering major automatically gets a job. I do think the way we are thinking about, and the NEP is all making the right noises in the right direction in this frame, I think.
Yeah, so which brings me to online testing, because unfortunately the only way still left in our country to judge if somebody is bright enough, like Dr. Ramaswamy said, is to conduct these online tests. Dr. Wattle, what has your experience been with online? We are a low trust society, so we want our cameras on to see our children when they're writing their exams. But what else do we do, right? I mean, how else do you? What is your experience been with online tests?
Can I just say one point before she takes over? Yes. I think the major demand now from all our students is offline classes, online exams.
Yeah. They'll go everywhere, but when there are exams, they want to be home. I think. Dr. Wattle, you're on mute, right?
You put me in such a niche by just asking me about online testing. When I'm hearing the very interesting things that Professor Ramaswamy and Professor Rao are talking about, when they're talking about the whole understanding of interdependence, and they're talking about the humanization of learning. And I think that's so essential, because we are in an iterative change, so to speak. And all this while, we have been pushed into designing schools for crisis, and not what we wanted them to be. And I think this gave us a great opportunity to start thinking as to how could we accelerate the changes that we had, how could we rethink our vision for our schools. So I will speak about online a little later.
Yeah.
But I would like to speak on, and I think it's very important that parents hear this, that as school communities across the board, we felt that, after a while, there was a lot of excitement when this whole online business started. But then there became that sociological term called the routinization of charisma. People were bored to death. and students started escaping from class. And of course, this online testing business, there's no way that I would like to put cameras or keep those nannies watching them, because you know very well that they are absolutely fantastic at finding ways and means of navigating those nannies. And so there are people who can take photographs, they can quickly skim it to others. There are 5 mobile phones working at one time while a test is going on. It's an industry. So I don't even want to get into how do you get out of online testing. In fact, I was extremely sort of wise about it. And I said, look, whatever you do, if there are things that I find, because I've known you for years, and if there are teachers who find that there are things suddenly overnight from a 50%er, you become a 90%er. So then we will just write, done very well with the support of parents and friends. So that's the kind of report cards I sent back. So of course, after a while, there was a bit of a problem with this, because then, you know, then I had phone calls saying that, but I said, see, how can that happen overnight? How can these things happen? But we have a very supportive parent community. And I think it's very important to do parental engagement when you get into things like this, because, you know, the parents themselves want the correct picture. Anyway, having said that, I think we as schools, and I'm talking about the fact that when we talked about how it is necessary that we make connections globally, the COVID helped us in so many ways that children created projects with children across Finland, across the United Kingdom and America, as far out as South America, even though we have so many exchanges, but there have never been so much of material that came forward, so many meetings with children from across the globe. We involved the UNESCO and the UNICEF in this, and there were so many conversations that took place. Children really grew, and they understood that their counterparts across the world are facing the same situations. And it was very important in COVID for teachers and children to understand that they were not alone, that we were all facing the same problems, that every teacher, there was no teacher, even in the United States, who knew all the answers or who was doing the right thing. And the most developed countries, we realized, were perhaps in a bigger mess, or perhaps in the same situation as us. That gave us, I'm not saying that that's sort of, that's good, but that certainly helped us to believe that competition may give you success, but collaboration will give you livelihood. And I think this kind of mindset, where we started looking at school leadership in schools, mobilizing and stabilizing and strategizing. We started doing these kind of aspects. And when we looked at mobilization of schools, we said that, you know, there has to be equitable access to resources. So we shared, you know, teaching can be a fairly narrow and not a team building thing in school at least. But we said that we must share resources. The amount of schools that came together to do workshops for teachers across the world, the amount of schools that came together to do workshops for children. So there were all sorts of hues on a Zoom meeting, and we were able to have equitable access to resources. We were able to set up streamlined systems and locate from each other, how do you do assessments online? What are the new rubrics you can find? And the NEP gave us that kind of freedom to look at how do we look at foundational rubrics? How do we look at middle level rubrics? Then we set up schedules and prioritized our future development, and we started focusing on what connections should we make. What is it? Because you can't replicate a policy of Finland onto India. You can't replicate the way ASA or any other or OECD looks at learning. There has to be an Indian flavor, an Indian context, a regional context. And so we talked about how do we stabilize. So we built up a lot of capacity. We fought and pollinated ideas. We responded to feedback immediately, whether it was the student feedback, an international feedback, a teacher feedback, and we consistently encouraged collaboration. And we believe that we tried to curate the signal from the noise. You know, that was very important. And so children understood also that everything cannot be a cut-paste job, because now everything was open. So there were these open commons, and if children brought out projects, we could easily find out if they were plagiarized. And so there was a lot of emphasis that came on, because people are even plagiarizing research. People are plagiarizing PhDs. And so now with this whole idea of the fact that you are open and there is no privacy, then that stopped children from doing that. So we created with the Japanese, we got into collaboration, and we got involved with schools in Uttarakhand, and we created the haiku collection, the Indian way. and the Japanese kids came on. They may not have understood the language, but they understood the sort of sound, and they understood the context. So we strategized these things. We saw opportunities. We redesigned things. We got involved in a very big way in peer learning. And we created a culture of research and development which is not there in schools. It's there in unis. It's there in organizations like the IIT. Schools do not have R&Ds, but we created that. And we felt that the teacher's role has to be rethought, because it's critical to recognize that the role of a leader at a time of a crisis is going to face rapid change. So we've been consistently working and determining what are the capacities we need to restructure and develop the way that we look at learning in our schools. And of course, offline and online exams, we realized that when school children came back to school, as I mentioned to you, today when the kids came back, let me tell you, I had nearly 100% attendance for children who came back in grades 9 and 11, because that was done on their own accord. CBSE ensured that 10th and 12th has to come back for practicals. But for the final exams, when 9th and 11th came back, I actually gave them a 10% extra because I felt it gave a lot of courage for a child to come back. And I remember so clearly that when I entered the laboratories and spoke to them, so many of them had stories where at least 50% of them had lost grandparents, had lost close people to them. And there was so much of maturity that had developed. I felt my children had lost innocence. And that is very tragic, especially for young people who must be joyful, who must understand play, and for whom life must carry on in stages and not as a leap where you just lose out emotionally. And they lost out so deeply on the losses that they had during COVID. But they're amazing. And I'd like to use the word resilience, which was used by one of our panelists here. They were resilient, they were strong, and I'm so proud of this generation. I don't think our generation could have done what this generation did in this year. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So so Dr. Vattal spoke about engaging the larger community, the parent community. So Mr. Swami, is that something you noticed in Rajasthan during this pandemic? Were parents, and the recent ASER survey too mentioned how there was much more parent involvement. Did you see that happening?
Yes, there was a lot of parent engagement because the mobile phone is still a luxury. So for a class 5th or a class 4th child, you won't get a mobile phone. So for that, you need parents synchronizing their work cycles so that the child could actually see the videos, could do its quizzes, could do its teacher calling and etc. So for that, we needed parents, and I completely agree with Amita ma'am that they have responded beautifully. One more thing that like ma'am just mentioned was boring. So yes, it was monotonous job, and the students also recognized that it was monotonous. So we like in government of Rajasthan, what we did, we introduced something that was in line with NEP. So we introduced some spoken languages courses, like we introduced French, we introduced German. We introduced some courses or workshops basically, which were dealing with coding, which were dealing with robotics, which were dealing with vocational skills and how to develop them, especially for class 8th onwards. So what happened in that, so many of the students that were there, they participated in this and they actually went on to complete all those courses. So this helped in adding to whatever they were learning from the school. So a different skill set developed, and with that skill set came in the career choice that they would like to make in future. So in private school, in big private school, there is a luxury that we have some career counseling sessions. We have a particular set where a student will go and there is assessment on that point of view. But in government schools, you didn't have that at this point of time. But now the children became more aware that what they want. And with we had a new interactive series where we used to tell our students that what are all your choices in career and what you can do. We had a Rajiv Gandhi Career Seva portal in which all those the bureaucrats with all the teachers, all the academicians, everybody will come give a lecture and they will tell you. So there was a lot of engagement in that. The point of view was that we forgot about the teacher training. So like with the students training, the second important aspect was teacher training, that how to make them acclimatize with the recent changes like in digital education and all. So we started some digital training courses for teachers as well. So that was in tune, as sir was saying, that they must know how the changes are going to happen and how to deal with them, how to deal with the concept of blended learning as per se. So for other aspects which were related to NEP, so they had to prepare for that. So we are constantly moving in that direction. We are now means we have some announcements in the recent budget where we are going to engage with guest faculties as well. So what these guest faculties will do, they will add the vigor in the the practicality of education that is there. So they will add all those aspects to the ongoing education that was already being present. Then thirdly, one more thing is there, that class first to fifth, they are more or less, they didn't came to school for past 1 year, 1.5 years, and at very young age what happens, as Amita ma'am was also saying, that you tend to forget that what all you have learned in class 1 or what all you have learned in class 2. So how to deal with that, how to cope up with that? So we have come up with the idea of workbooks. So with those workbooks, there will be cluster level workbooks where with the starting of next session, for 1.5 months, we would be teaching only those workbooks. So with those workbooks, what will happen? The past recollection of memories, all those concised syllabus and concised question with the practicality aspects will come into force, and then when the student will again start its own syllabus for that own class, then it will be ready at that platform as it would have been if Corona was not there. So these few changes, I guess, it will help in the shaping of the future of the children, especially here in Rajasthan.
Thank you. So I have a quick last question for Dr. Rao, after which we move to the final round of questions, one final round that I have. So Dr. Rao, do you think schools and colleges now after the pandemic will be more flexible to the needs of students in terms of instead of a one size fit all approach kind of a thing? Will there be courses and learning designed around individual students? Do you see that happening?
I think that will take some more time. I think the online, to me, if I look at what will happen to IITs, which I am very well aware of, one thing which will definitely happen is, we will have a major presence in the cyberspace. There will be lot many programs available from IITs, where IITs will certify diplomas and all of that. So those sort of things will be there at a very major scale. That is one thing post-COVID will happen. Our education on the campuses will be more hybrid. So lectures will be available to students. They can, the flipped classroom kind of a model, probably will pick up now quite well. And since a lot of material is already available online, so I think this flipped classroom kind of an approach will happen. The third thing which I think will also happen is the research that we do. Now, I think we will judge research as good research only if it becomes visible to the society. I mean, just by publishing a paper, we will not be able to claim we have done anything great unless our research becomes visible to the society. I think, there will be issues. So therefore, I think these are the three things which I think will happen for sure. The flexibility will come more in terms of a hybrid approach, more in terms of scaling up our education. So there will be, more and more students taking our courses and getting certificates online. That will definitely happen now. And research which is more impactful, I think that is also something that will happen. So these things to me will happen. Otherwise, the flexibility that exists on our campuses will continue. Even now, we are trying to become more and more flexible. A student can design one's set of courses now to a very large extent that we would have done even without COVID. I think COVID hasn't really changed that part of it, because wherever the world has always been moving towards more flexible kind of a curriculum in these institutions. So that anyway would have happened. And would happen in the same fashion.
Okay. So just to end on a more positive note, what is, like, I'd like to ask one question, the same question of each of you. What is the most exciting prediction that you have for, say, a year from now for education? How do you see education changing? Now, of course, nobody thought we would be, 1 year ago, nobody thought we would be here with all these online classes, schools shutting down, universities shutting down. So what is that one big prediction that you have for education? It may happen, may not happen, but what do you see? Would you like to do that? Dr. Ramaswamy, do you want to start?
That's an interesting question, Uma. And I'm trying to think about, I'm not sure that I'm not a good looker into the crystal ball of the future. But I do think, building on my comments that I started with, I think the premium, maybe not one word, the premium will be on innovation, and the second one will be how do we connect? Because the one thing we have lost because of digital is the ability to connect, and human beings love to connect. And the younger the kids, as Dr. Amrita said, it's worse for them. But even adults want. I mean, seniors and high school and 12th graders want to be with their friends, and so we are not built as a species to be socially and physically distant. So connectivity and innovation, I think if this continues, if the pandemic eventually becomes an endemic, I think the premium will be on who can innovate in a meaningful way. A lot of questions that you've asked and the answers that you've gotten from me and Dr. Rao and Mr. Swamy and Dr. Amita were precisely about the various innovations. Some of this falls in the concept of Jugaad, but the other one is real innovation that moves the needle. So I think innovation is something that should come through and will actually be transformative and disruptive and all of that. The other is how do we reclaim our connection as humanity, whether it's between friends, within families, dealing with mental stress, as society, so that we have lost a lot of that in the last 1 year. So.
Thank you. Dr. Rao, would you?
Yeah, I think, the scale and quality, these two things will go hand in hand. That I'm saying because I think the quality education, what, for example, IITs offer or some of our good universities offer has never been done on scale. I think what pandemic, now post-pandemic, because of all these online things getting integrated into our regular mode, I think the scale and quality will go hand in hand, which is a very good sign. And even on the innovation side, I can tell you in the 60-year history of IIT Delhi, the highest number of patents we filed during the COVID year. 2020, IIT Delhi filed 153 patents. And that was because there was an urgency, there was a need, there was a problem which was very well defined. The entire institute was working on just one problem, which is COVID. And no wonder the innovation potential also became so high during that year. I think, that is a message probably that we can take from COVID.
Dr. Vatal? You're on mute. I think you're on mute, Dr.
Yes,
Vatal.
I'm okay now.
Yeah.
I'm okay now?
Yeah.
Fine. So I'm very much in sync and on the same page as wonderful panel that is there with me. And I think the emphasis is that, we have to plan a future for our schools where we have to sort of consolidate the shifting vision, mission, culture. Because, the whole culture has to change. Because we all need a new culture for staff, students, and family engagement. We have to cater to different needs and abilities, and yet stay focused and create a system of collaboration for a new learning community. And I think for this, we have to understand that we have to shift from a notion of a singular path towards a more elastic understanding of making schools technologically alive. Because this crisis requires us to recreate learning platforms, which are across the world. And all crucial skills will have to become teachable and learnable anytime and anywhere. And I think we have to respond to that. And the biggest way of responding, I feel, is the social emotional learning cell. And I think we need to bring that into the curriculum, embed it, create an emotional compass, because there is no doubt that children today, learning will happen with or without us, because technologically learning is there. But compassion, justice, environmental sensitivity, sustainable development goals, all these aspects, that gender sensitivity, all these aspects that make us human is all embedded in our emotional compass. And I think with technology, we have to be very careful, because it is only a tool. Sometimes it's taken over people's lives. And so it is essential that the social emotional learning compass gets into play, so that the children understand that they need these skills to cope. Skills of, as I just mentioned to you, of getting together, of being able to cope, of be able to emotionally withstand crisis, of conflict resolution. And I think that's what, to me, is the most exciting, because that is the most innovative way of looking at learning. And along with that, of course, the whole understanding of entrepreneurship, how children can learn to learn, the whole metacognition of children, the meta-learning, learning to learn, learning to be aware of what you are learning. So a child has to be looked at as a four-dimensional learning, in the learning context of a four-dimensional child. So it is the length, the breadth, the depth, and the deepest thing is the consciousness. Consciousness of the child cannot get damaged, and we have to help them to build that consciousness and build student advocacy and choice. And I think that's a very exciting thing right now, because we have to find ways and means and new innovations to discover that for our children in our schools.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Mr. Swami?
I will like to culminate, the basic thing that our students and even the parents are going to learn from this pandemic, and it will be norm, is self-awareness and awareness about society. So in self-awareness comes everything. Sir said that there have been a lot of patents. So why? Because that we understood that we cannot just simply waste our time sitting at homes. There is an awareness about news, that what is going on around in my society, what is going on around with farmer problem or environmental issues or what all. But when we were in school, they were learning, so they were just simply going to school and coming back. There was a monotonicity that was there. But since there was a sudden break, then all the students, all those realized that what else, what all are the different platforms where we can go, how can we enhance our skills, how can we do different things, how can we do multitasking. So that self-awareness and then awareness of society, it invigorated in us the scientific temper, we can say. Just a small example for that, there are Inspire Awards that happens with NIF. So from Rajasthan itself, during the Corona times, there were more than 1.5 lakh applications. In the pre-Corona time, there were only 20,000. And out of those 1.5 lakh, 8,000 students were selected. So that was the highest in the country in Rajasthan. So how that happened? Because the students came to know that these all things are also available over there. You talk about Olympiads, you talk about NTSEs, you talk about all other tests, you talk about different skills that are going to play a vital role. So government schools were a bit lacking in that, but now they have come to the forefront, because now they have understood the value of these. So that this self-awareness, this goal that they set for themselves will be the new normal for the upcoming generation.
Thank you so much. Now, this wonderful panel that we have here, I just realized we'll need at least 5 such sessions to hear all these great ideas. But I think we'll now have to move on to the audience questions. But before that, for me, the big takeaway is that education, whether it's private or government, is unlikely to go back to. We are unlikely to go back to our old ways, because despite being caught completely off guard, I think educators have made things work. Finding ideas that could potentially transform education in India. So on that note, at this point, I think let me thank our partners once again for making this session possible. Our presenting partner, Hiranandani Group, associate partner, NITI Mumbai, MIT ADT University, SPJIMR, and live webcast partner, 24 Frames Digital. I think we'll move on to the audience question. Professor Suraj Bhoyar, can you please ask your question? Professor Bhoyar? Yeah, should we move to the next person, Professor Poonam Singh? Professor Poonam Singh? Is Professor Poonam Singh here? No? Okay. Professor Rauf Iqbal. I hope you're here. Yeah. Yes, we can hear you, yeah.
Because there is a possibility that 50% can become 90%, even more than that, because as a student, I have with me Google and all other, supported by all other textbooks. So probably during my classes, I can show my symbol on the screen, no matter I am attending the class or not. I am talking the other side of the coin. No matter I am attending the class or not, mostly students, many places students follow this thing, and it creates a lot of disparity, because if I quote unquote, if I say that this is a kind of unethical practice, that though this is virtual examination, but during virtual examination, everything is available. And those who are really ethical students, those who follow ethics, and real studious and intelligent students, they don't follow probably those kind of things. They will appear in the exam as far as in a proper way. So probably there will be some disparity in the evaluation, in the scorecard. Okay, so how to handle this issue? Do you think that the whole thing become open book exam as long as the COVID remains? Let us go for, it may be from high school to the management school, everything should be open book exam. What is your opinion?
Am I being addressed for this, Uma?
Yeah, sorry, who were you asking? Do you want a specific?
Yeah, I am Professor Rauf Iqbal, Associate Dean, Placement and Branding from NITI Mumbai.
Yeah, so which of the panelists would you?
I think I am asking Amita ma'am.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question, Professor, because you're absolutely right. And in fact, let me share with you that as a group of educators, we have tried to find questions which are not Googleable. And I think that is what is important, that the kind of questions that are created, which are thinking questions, which are out of the box, which will then ensure that children are using their minds. So if we give a typical question that is, well, a board question, then you can have much more examples of children, some children doing, not all, but some, you're absolutely right. But the thing is, the question is how we have to design questions in a manner where children use their minds, they're able to connect it to real life. And that is one. And the other is that, yes, an open book test is very, very good way of doing it. In fact, we have used that method, and we have been successful in the method of open book testing, especially in grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. Children we have realized it's very difficult to do an open book and then use any other unethical means. So yes, open book, and also designing questions which are completely different, and you have to spend a lot of time on the question paper. so that you know that the child has to really think and can't get the question out of his colleague or get the question out of Google or get the question. So that is what I think it is essential that at least teachers and schools should ensure that the questions that they create are innovative, are unique, are different, and yet are involved with the topic that is being asked. Thank you very much for that, Professor.
Professor Iqbal, I hope that answers your question. I'm moving on to Elisha Vermani. Is she here? Delhi University, media student.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah.
So I have two questions for the panelists at large, and then one specifically for Dr. Rao. I hope that's okay. My first question is if someone would like to comment on why school education presents caste-based discrimination as a thing of the past, and especially in the context of how the pandemic has objectively made this divide even worse. My second question is the obsession with merit as a concept that's instilled during our schooling without giving students a comprehensive understanding of how different types of privileges intersect to produce a quote-unquote meritorious individual. So what solution do you propose to combat this narrative? And my last question, specifically for Mr. Rao, is why IIT is not implementing the reservation policy for their recruitment processes, and why are they unfortunately still the bastions of upper class and upper caste privilege?
Dr. Rao, do you want to go first? Take the last question.
Yeah. I think it's not that we are not implementing anything. For staff, for example, we implement reservation. You check the staff reservation policies in IITs. We are following strictly all the reservation policies for the staff. Look at the students. 70% of students in IITs now come through some quota or the other. 70%. If we are against reservation, why would we implement it for students and staff and not implement it for faculty? For faculty, our every advertisement actually says that we are looking at faculty from all of these categories, but we are not able to find them. Now, why are we not able to find them? You need to go back and look at the PhD students now. So now we don't have enough PhD students from these communities in IITs. That is one of the biggest challenges we are facing. In fact, I wrote a committee report for MHRD on behalf of a committee as the chairman. We said, let us start a pre-PhD program for people from these communities, and let us build now at least 1,000 people from these communities who come to IITs and do a pre-PhD, spend 1 year, 1.5 years, start their PhD work, and then once they are able to get accustomed to the IIT system, IIT level of education and research and all of that, and then they can become part of the PhD students, and then they can eventually become faculty. If you are not able to fill up PhD students from these communities, you're not going to find them from somewhere to have faculty positions. I think it has to start early on, and it has to start at the pre-PhD level, then PhD, then faculty. But we are all in a hurry. If you say that start the reservations and next year fill up all the positions, it doesn't work that way. In students, 70% of students at IIT Delhi, if you look at now, or in any IIT today, come from one quota or the other. In staff, all reservation posts are filled. Where they are available, they are being recruited. So I think it's as simple as that, and we're unnecessarily reading too much into all of this.
So the other question I think she had was merit versus versus a more well-rounded student is how I understand. So Mr. Ramaswamy, Dr. Ramaswamy, would you want to take that?
No, I think that's a very good question. And in fact, when we were thinking about the designing of CREA as a university, we were very clear in our mission statement to admit high potential students, not just people who do well in board exams. And so, in fact, we have a very, very rigorous two-stage looking at over 18 to 20 criteria, of which 12th board exam is one of those criteria. So we go back all the way to 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th, and various pieces of information comes in, including immersive case experience that students come to, which are assessed by faculty and so on. So I do think that's a fair question. I think we obsess about standardized exams, we obsess about board exams, and I am sympathetic because we are such a vast country and there has to be some standardized principle. It's a very labor-intensive admissions process for us, but we chose to do it because we wanted to get students from all walks of life, all spectrums, in terms of the way we are choosing them to come to us, because we are looking for potential rather than just merit and performance.
Okay, I think do we have time for one more question? Priyadarshini Kelkar from the live questions. Soumya, do you want to connect?
Hello, good evening, everybody. All panelists, I'm very happy to be listening to all of you. Mr. Swami, you have taken great initiative in educating the Rajasthan students. Have you found out ways to find whether the children are more self-motivated and they self-reflect themselves? Because what we have been talking about is giving online exams where children keep on copying, but then when the child takes the responsibility of his or her own studies, that won't happen. Have you found that out somewhere?
Yeah, very interesting question. See, in Rajasthan, there if I talk about government school, so for students, there the luxury of online exam is still not there. So we are all having our offline exams as per now. So in that sense, our all the students are generally geared up for, like, they have to do their part of syllabus. The syllabus was reduced as CBSE did, as we also did reduce our syllabus. So as per that, they were taught. And at this point of time, I must say, since we are nearing our exams for class 8 to 12th, so there will be offline exams. The students would be coming to the schools and giving that exam. So I do not think so that there is a complacency in them that they can cheat with the system. But the motivation part, yeah, the motivation part was used because what they saw, I earlier talked about the self-awareness. So that the sense of self-awareness grew in them. So they like emotionally, as well as Amita ma'am just said, that they with emotional, with all mental thing, they grew up, they became mature enough to understand that they have to do something in their life. Secondly, I just want to point out one more thing. In the previous question, that one thing was asked, that how merit and examination. So I would like to point out one thing, that in India, when we are living in India, a person to get his career going or get his job going, he has to clear one competitive exam. Either it can be IIT, either it can be NEET, or either it can be any job exam. And for that, the importance of 10th and 12th exams become pivotal. So these are the learning, the starting levels with which the competition feeling comes in our students. So if we just simply go with open book exams and all, so suddenly they are exposed after 12th to such heavy exams, you can say IIT JEE or qualifications and all. So they might not gear up for that. So 10th and 12th boards are very much important for making our students mature enough to handle the situation later on in their life. So that point of aspect was still missing in that thing. So I would like to that. Thank you.
Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. So I said we have time for two more questions. Richa Vasishta and Prabhat Kumar. Richa, would you like to go first?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. It was such an insightful session I've attended, and it was such a great, side I've seen. I've been a parent, so I see one side, but from the other side, it is like such a hard work you guys have put in, which we as parents don't see. So I really appreciate everyone's effort, and thank you, Indian Express, that you've given us the opportunity to see all this. My question is to everyone, that do you think that nowadays, like after post COVID, do we need to focus on a different kind of infrastructure? we have been focusing on building buildings, the labs. Now, do you think we need to establish our internets, handy phones, or maybe laptops? Is it the focus shifting there? Because this is the future. We can't say that it's post-COVID. Now, this is it. This is the future, and it is not going to end. So, do you think there'll be a little shift in the way we talk about infrastructure now?
Richard, do you want to address it to us? Do you have a panelist in mind? Do you want one of them to answer? Do you want to name the panelist? Dr. Ramaswamy, would you like to take that?
Basically, because school is the one which has affected.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I think that's a very good question, because I think that's a very important question, because all of us will have to now relook at our licenses, the kind of optic fibers we have, the kind of technology that is available in the school system to connect with children, because there is no doubt that we're going to have hybrid learning, we're going to have synchronous and asynchronous learning, and what Swamiji keeps talking about as in blended learning, because there are all aspects of technology and a one-to-one learning. So schools of brick and mortar will become tapestries of technology. And that is what is essential. And also we will have to ensure, because a lot of people use licenses without really paying for them. I think it's essential that licenses should be there. And also we should have these common platforms which the government should supply across the country, on which we can have these online classes. Why should we pay for companies which will become more and more expensive once COVID becomes hopefully leaner and leaner, but we'll still have the systems. So cannot this become a pathway where governments can give us these platforms which becomes like the roads and the railways, because we are paying for them through our taxes. And so children have access in every home and every village. Children should have access to these platforms, like we are using Microsoft or we are using Zoom. Platforms like this or Impartus that are available to children, so that any point of time they can have connections with our teachers. The teachers can upload their materials on YouTube. So I think we'll have to relook and restructure entirely the way that schools look. Schools will always be there, but they'll be there with a sort of a teachology and a technology which will be sort of interconnected. And I think that is what is very important. So thank you for that important question, Richa. And we need to look at that and how we transact learning in that method.
Thank you. Thank you, Richa. Prabhat Kumar, I think that should be the final question of the day.
Yeah, hello. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Actually, in the last year, we have totally replaced offline education with online education. We have experienced whole year totally online education, but at that time that we can compare online with the offline education, but we have noticed a lot more advantage along with the limitations as well. So my question is directly that in future we can see of online education as a replacement, I mean total replacement of offline education, or as a complement to online, I mean the complement to each other. Actually, whenever we need something 3D effect, we can use online education, or we can totally replace offline education with online education.
Dr. Ramaswamy, do you want to take that?
No, I think I hope I speak for all the panelists, I think, who have used phrases like hybrid and blended. I really do think that will be the way forward in every level, whether it's K through 12 or whether it's college or higher post-graduation. And within disciplines, we'll make our choices as to how do we blend, what do we blend. I really don't see that. It's a very important question, but I really don't see a whole-scale replacement of teaching that goes completely online. I do think we'll open new vistas and new platforms of engaging online with existing degree courses or school courses, or as I said earlier, to new potential students, whether they are adult learners and so on. But for instance, as complete replacement of 11th and 12th going online, on a massive scale, I don't see that happening, or undergraduate in, say, Delhi University completely going online. I don't see it happening. We haven't even worked out the effectiveness of how impactful online is at every age group. That will take some time with the child's development specialists and cognitive neuroscientists and everybody putting their heads together and find out whether it is good to go online for how long and so on. And do we have to calibrate that depending on the age of the child or the age of the student? So I think we are learning from this year. As I said, this year we have just had to do it. Necessity is the mother of invention, so we've had to do it. But whether we'll do it by choice, which I think is the question, I think we will make the right choices of going more online, but I don't see it happening like a binary going from 0 to 1. We'll flip a switch and everything goes online. I hope it doesn't happen personally, because I think we lose a lot too. But I do think in many ways, I think we break down teaching into smaller and smaller components. There are certain aspects that I think online are here to stay. And I think it makes it more efficient. It makes it more effective. And in some cases, it actually promotes learning. But I think we need to do a lot more understanding of from this year of not just blindly follow it just because it's a cool gadget or it's a smart tech invention and just blanketly impose it. I would think that would be a worse disaster.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Prabhat, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, thank you so much to each of the panelists. I mean, I can't thank you enough for taking time off your busy schedules and being here. Dr. Rao has been a little under the weather, but he's still, thank you so much, sir. Thanks to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you meet again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.